All right, hello everyone. Got a fun review today, reviewing the movie Barbarian. Um, just to give a little context, I had never heard of this movie. Knew nothing about it aside from the fact that there was a trailer I think that popped up before a YouTube video, and I saw that it had Bill Skarsgård in it, who I love. And then it looked like it was kind of a horror movie, so I was like, you know what? That's all I want to know. That's all I'm going to know going in. Um, And this is an interesting movie. I will get talking to spoilers in the second half of the video, but for the first half, we'll keep it spoiler free. But just to give kind of the general idea for those that are not familiar with this movie or haven't heard of it, I actually have it pulled up on IMDb here just so I can read the official synopsis. It just says that a woman staying at an Airbnb discovers that the house she has rented is not what it seems. It's directed by a guy called Zach Krieger, who I haven't heard of before. After this, I probably should have looked into his history first, just to see if he's done anything that I've seen or that I've liked. But he directed and wrote the movie, and then obviously it stars Bill Skarsgård and Georgina Campbell, who plays the main character Tess. And so, just to give a little more context, because you find this out at the very beginning of the movie, so this isn't spoilers. The main question is that Bill Skarsgård's character and Georgina Campbell's character Tess, they somehow both rented out the same Airbnb at the same time. So the movie starts with her showing up and then him opening the door. So this is not, spoilers or anything. And I haven't watched any of the trailers, like I said, but I'm sure that this is explained in the trailers too, just to give a little more context to what's going on. And so then it's about them trying to kind of figure that out and then figure out what else is at play. And I won't get into any more specifics than that. Like I said, this is a really interesting movie in the sense that it easily could have been incredibly formulaic and generic. And in terms of if they had decided to take the story in a different direction. And I'm really glad that they didn't, just because that's just kind of boring. I don't mind if something's been done before as long as it's done extremely well. But had it gone sort of how you suspect it might go, it would just be one of those movies where you'd watch it and go, okay, yeah, that was a thing, and then you move on and you forget about it. This is not a movie that I'll forget, mainly because, maybe mainly because it definitely doesn't turn out how you expect. When I was done watching the movie, I had a very similar feeling after I watched the movie Malignant with James Wan. Now, if you've seen that movie, this does not get as off the rails as Malignant did. Don't get me wrong, but it gave me the same kind of impression. That's not the right word, but it's, even though overall I thought that Malignant was a little silly, I have to applaud the fact that James Wan tried to do something unique and different. And even though not everything about it landed, I really like that it wasn't afraid to get weird. And like I said, this movie doesn't get anywhere near as weird as Malignant did, but it definitely doesn't turn out how you'd expect. And I really like that aspect of it. I like that it's not just what could have easily been another formulaic horror thriller that just turns out exactly how you'd expect and then moves on. The movie's not perfect. I definitely have some problems with some of the things that played out, and probably my biggest criticism is, unfortunately, in true horror movie fashion, people in this movie most of the time do not act how logical, rational human beings act. So if you are the type to get put off by characters making horror movie decisions, you're probably not going to like this, because there's quite a few of them, unfortunately. There's definitely more than once where it just, you're watching as it's playing out and you're going, really? Like, come on, if we were real people, we wouldn't be doing that. But aside from that, honestly, I had a really good time. The directing is absolutely beautiful. This movie looks terrific, and without getting into spoilers, just keeping this really high level, but there are some flashback sequences, and the director made the decision of, during those flashback sequences, to film them with a different aspect ratio, more remnant of that time period. And I love it when directors do that, because when you're on the outside, it's a relatively small thing in terms of you're like, oh, it's a different aspect ratio. What's the big deal? But it really helps sell the authenticity of that time period when they do that. For me, at least. There's been a few different movies that have done stuff like that, and that was actually one of the things I really liked about the Steve Jobs movie where Michael Fassbender played him. I think it was just called Jobs. It's been a while since I've seen it, but during each of the three main time periods in that movie, if you haven't seen it, they used cameras that replicated the kind of the film quality of that era. And I love that because it's such a relatively small thing, but it really helps sell that that's the time period that is being portrayed on screen at that moment. Acting was really good. Georgina Campbell, I almost called her Tess Campbell, and I'm like, no, Tess is the character's name. I really liked her. I can't recall having seen her in anything else, or if she was in something that I've seen, either I don't remember her, or it was just a small part that I wouldn't have noticed. I really liked her. I thought she did a really great job. And Bill Skarsgård, it's hard to say a bad thing about him. I really, really like him, and I thought he did a pretty good job. It's definitely not the most... His role doesn't have the most to work with, so his character isn't super fleshed out, but as far as him as an actor, I thought he did a great job. There's a couple other notable actors in the movie, but I won't... Like I said, I haven't watched trailers, so I don't know if they're shown in the trailers, and I don't want to give away kind of just because it was a bit of a surprise for me. Like, oh, I didn't know they were in this. But they did well as well. There's definitely some horror, prosthetic, gore, some in the horror realm, some of that stuff, and all of it looked really great. Overall, I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed the movie, despite the problems that I have with it, which we will get into because I have a couple of them. And unfortunately, though, and this is a bit of a side tangent, but I just have to complain for a minute. I was definitely... My experience was a little bit more negative than I would have liked because of the people in the theater. Most of the time, 99% of the time when I go to the theater, it's a great experience. I've almost never have problems with people texting during the movie, talking during the movie, any of that ridiculousness. But I definitely had a little bit of that this time. The people to my left were just kind of whispering and guessing what was happening and doing that the whole time, and I guess they were whispering, so you kind of to an extent have to let it go, but it's still annoying when you're trying to focus on the movie, especially a thriller horror movie where noise can really impact your immersion and your enjoyment. And the people on my right they weren't right to the right of me. There was a couple a couple empty seats, and then they were over there. It was a girl, and I assume her boyfriend or husband or, romantic partner or whatever. And the way that they reacted to this movie, and a little bit the people on my left too, you'd think they'd never seen a horror movie before. There is nothing in this movie as far as horror thriller elements that particularly stands out. There were a couple of sequences that were actually surprisingly tense, but there's nothing mind-blowing about the horror elements of this movie. But the way that they were reacting, you would think it's the first scary movie that they've ever seen. And that's just how some people enjoy it, and that's fair. That's not how I enjoy horror movies, but the one particular thing that I explicitly remember was the girl that was on my right. At one point, I remember hearing her say, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it was something to the extent of, "This is seriously the most tense I've ever been in my entire life," or something to that effect, implying that this was the scariest movie she'd ever seen and that she was just that tense. And I was just like, really? Like, it's not that scary, but that's nothing to do with the actual movie. That's the theater experience, which unfortunately is kind of a coin toss on if you get a positive or a negative experience. Not much that I could do about that, but is what it is. So overall, I definitely would recommend the movie. It's not something that I would recommend. You don't necessarily need to rush out and see it. It's definitely a good matinee, pre-evening prices type of movie, in my opinion. But I would definitely avoid it if you don't like movies where characters make dumb decisions. And I feel like with horror, we all expect that to an extent, but this movie definitely has a number of questionable decisions where you're just going, why are you, come on? But then also, if you don't like horror movies that get a little weird, because it definitely takes some turns that you wouldn't expect, and I could definitely see and understand people being put off by that. But if neither of those two things are a problem, I have no problem recommending it. I think you'll have a really great time. So now we're going to get into spoilers. This is your warning. Going forward, we're talking about spoilers. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I want to explain them, assuming that you've seen the movie, or explain what's happening as if you haven't seen the movie. I guess we'll just kind of see what comes out of my mouth, and we'll go from there. So the thing that I liked the most about this was that Bill Skarsgård ended up being legitimate. I was definitely worried that, the main character shows up to this house and this guy's already there. And then there's a point where the next day, she goes to walk in the house and this hobo comes running after her like, no, don't go in the house, whatever. So you're like, okay, well, maybe they're going to be setting up Bill Skarsgård as some sort of serial killer, or like he's a ghost or something, And I really liked that they made it so that he was just a guy stuck in the same situation that she was, and he was trying to do his best. Unfortunately, I do struggle with the idea that she would willingly put herself into this situation. So when he answers the door and they get over the initial confusion, and then he invites her in, and he's like, hey, you can, if you want to come in, we can try and figure this out. And I feel like at the very least, she needed to have some sort of pepper spray or some sort of weapon, because you're going to go into this weird, creepy guy's house and, okay, it's not his house, it's the Airbnb, but, it's like we've all been around long enough to know that that's a terrible idea. And she does it, which, okay, but she does, eventually he convinces her to spend the night there. And insists that she takes the bedroom because he's trying to be kind of like a gentleman type thing, which was nice. And the bedroom door does have a lock on it. But again, it's like the thing that was most frustrating about that aspect is that he convinces her by saying, because she tries to call a hotel and they say they're all booked up. And then he's like, oh man, I just remembered that there's like this weird medical convention in town. And so you're probably not gonna be able to get a room. And she just goes, oh man, now what am I gonna do? She just takes his word for it. And it's like, okay, you could at least still keep trying as many hotels as you possibly can. You're just gonna take this random guy who, if he was trying to do something bad, of course that's the type of thing he'd try to say to you, and you're just gonna take his word for it, So that, I thought that was a little silly. And then there's the big twist that happens in the movie is that you find out that the house was owned by this guy, and this is what happens in the flashbacks, is where it explains this. And he basically, underneath the house, built this whole extensive tunnel system. And at first it was just this little hallway, and then there was a room in there that had a bed, a bucket, and a camera. So you're like, oh geez, this guy was doing stuff in there. But then there's another door, and then that goes down, and then there's just this whole big maze of underground hallways and things like that. And so when she finds this, and it's hidden behind a secret door, so that's why they don't just go down into the basement and be like, oh, what's down here? So she discovers the secret door. She discovers this. At first, she doesn't discover the part where it goes down even further. She just discovers the room with the camera and the bed. And so she obviously gets really freaked out, and then Bill Skarsgård's character comes back, and she's trying to explain it to him, and he's reacting in a really sketchy way, where I assume that the intent was to still make the audience be wondering whether or not he knew about it and was just pretending, or kind of what the story was there. And so just how he was reacting to her felt a little almost patronizing. It's in pretty typical horror movie fashion. He's not taking her really seriously. He's saying, oh, well, what's the big deal that you just found a room that has a bed and a buck in it? Like, it's like he's being purposely obtuse about what she's telling him. And that always just kind of annoys me. Because it's like, okay, like, really? You're not, it's not like she's just going to all of a sudden freak out about nothing. But then so he decides to go down and investigate, and she doesn't want to go down with him because she's so freaked out, so she doesn't. And then we learn after a little bit that he ends up discovering the part that goes way down, and apparently went all the way down there, which again strikes me as a little strange that he would do that without at least telling her, to be like, hey, did you know about this part that goes all the way down? Because it feels again like they're trying to build, because she's like going down the stairs and calling his character's name and he's not answering, and so it feels like they're trying to build the suspense of, oh, is he waiting somewhere to attack her and then put her in the room or something like that. And he's not answering, and so she's getting even more freaked out, and so she goes down, and then she discovers where it goes down even further, all the way down to the big maze of tunnels, and she's like calling his name, and then you hear him yell out just like, help, just help me. And it's just, I don't know, it felt like they altered the dialogue just enough to the point where they were trying to make it seem like he was still going to be a bad guy, and it I don't know, it just, there were times like that where it didn't really work for me, where it was, again, it just didn't feel like that's how real people in that situation would react. But then you go down there and okay, well, I have to explain this other part first. So the, along with the big twist of the guy using that house for things, you find out that he would, kidnap women, put them there, take advantage of them, and then eventually he started getting them pregnant, and so he would do the same thing with the children and the children's children and so forth. And so there's this really creepy looking lady who looks actually really similar to the, if you saw It Chapter 2, to the big naked lady that shows up a couple times, like when Beverly goes to visit her old apartment, and then the old lady's there, and then she turns into the big old naked lady with it. It looked really similar to that. I don't think it was the same prop, because I don't think that would work, but it if you've seen It Chapter 2, that's the kind of lady that is down there. And so when she initially goes down there, she ends up finding Bill Skarsgård, and she's like, okay, we gotta go, we gotta get out of here. And he's like, wait, no, you have to be quiet, she's down here somewhere. And it's like, okay, if she's down there and you have to be quiet, then why were you yelling out, save me? Which I guess he's probably taking a risk at that point, but it just, I don't know, just little things like that were kind of silly, and just a little strange. But so then we move, and we eventually learn that the kind of the other semi-known actor is Justin Long is in the movie, and I thought he did a great job. He's this kind of douchebag type actor who gets accused of doing some pretty bad things, and so we find out eventually that he owns this Airbnb, and he eventually goes out there, and it's been a couple weeks since Tess goes down into the basement, and so he walks into the Airbnb, and all of her stuff and Bill Skarsgård's character's stuff is still there. And so he calls whoever runs like the rental agency or whatever, and is like, what's going on? Like, there's still people's stuff here. And they're like, oh, we haven't had any tenants in there for a couple of weeks. And so apparently their logic is that they don't send anyone to clean the house until the next tenant is moving in. And then that's when they send a maid to clean the Airbnb to get ready for the new tenant. And it's like, that makes literally zero sense, because how do you verify that the people left? Apparently the ones that were renting the Airbnb had, Tess is still trapped there, and no one knew. Like, it just, it's, how would they not do some sort of verification to make sure that the tenant had actually left? And it was just really weird. But then, so he ends up there. He ends up in the whole situation, getting trapped in the downstairs and everything. And there's actually some really funny parts with him when he discovers the creepy room and then all the way down into the tunnels. He just gets excited because he thinks that's more square footage that he can add when trying to sell the house. And so there's this really, there's these really tense moments, and you know that there's this really creepy lady down there, and he's just like getting all excited and taking this tape measure and stuff. And I thought that was pretty funny, but I could see some people being put off by that if they're in the zone with the horror part, and then you bring in some comedy, because horror and comedy, you have to make sure to apply very carefully, otherwise it doesn't always work. So then the only other main part that I kind of struggled with was at the end, kind of during the big finale. So his character, Justin Long's character, has this heartfelt moment of realization where he keeps trying to get Tess to a hospital because he accidentally shot her because he thought that she was the creepy lady. And it seems like he's really self-reflecting over the awful stuff that he was accused of earlier in the movie, and talks about how he wonders if he's a bad person or just a good person that did a bad thing, but he's trying to make it right, and so that's why he wants to help Tess so much. And I thought that was good. And then basically the next second that he has to cut Tess loose and try to save himself, he does, of course, and then at the end he ends up getting killed. And so that just felt a little tropey to me, where it's like, oh, we have this guy who's done this awful thing, and then shows that maybe he's thinking about changing, but he didn't actually change, and then so we're gonna kill him. Like it was a little tropey, but I thought he did well with his part. But the only other part that was this little serious is how the big showdown happens. Is that they're on top of this water tower, him and Tess, and then the creepy lady's coming up to get him, and he's like, oh, so rather than both of us dying, I can get away, but that means you'll have to stay here and distract her. And then he throws Tess off the top of the water tower, which doesn't make any sense, because I mean, the creepy lady ends up diving after her, but how did he know she was going to do that? Like, that just, the logic of, oh, while she's concerning herself with you, I'll run away, that makes sense. But his idea to just throw Tess off of the water tower, did he know that the creepy lady was going to go diving after her? Or was he, I mean, so the creepy lady kind of catches her before they hit the ground so she doesn't die, but what if she had hit the ground? Then what was his plan? Like, it didn't really make any sense at all. And so I understand the logic behind the character's motivations at that moment, but what they had him actually do just made no sense to me. And maybe I'm just missing something. That's entirely possible. But then the other thing is that, one, I mean, the fact that the creepy lady was able to catch her is a little unrealistic. But so after he throws her, it shows the lady diving off after her, and then like cuts to black, and then opens back up, and you see them both lying on the street. And so the creepy lady's on the ground, and then Tess is on top of her. So it implies that the creepy lady caught her, and then she was the one that hit the ground first, and Tess was on her. And so that's how she was able to survive, which that in and of itself, it's like, okay, that's not specific to horror movies. That's just kind of some more just general movie logic. But the thing that was strange to me is that the creepy lady was not dead, but it's shown that she's just a regular person. And so it's that's one of those things where it's like, okay, would she really have survived that fall? I don't think so. But then they have her still be alive so that she can kill Justin Long's character. And, that again kind of felt a little tropey to me, where it's like, okay, I get that you wanted to, punish his character and that, but I don't know. That was another one of the things where it's like, that's kind of silly. I don't know. So those are the most of the, at least that I can remember, most of the kind of plot decisions, character decisions that, obviously we could get way more in depth, but broad strokes, that's the general thing of the parts that I didn't like. But so like I said earlier, if you can set that kind of stuff apart, I do think that the movie is still worth watching, because it's very unique. The fact that that they set it up so you expect Bill Skarsgård to be involved somehow, and he's not. Oh, and I didn't mention this before, but he ends up getting killed about halfway through the movie. So not only is he not the bad guy, but he ends up getting killed, which both of those were pretty unexpected. Then come to find out that when you're first introduced to this creepy lady, you don't know that she's just a normal human, and so you're wondering if she's some sort of creature or monster or ghost or whatever. You don't really know. And again, maybe that's something that's hinted at in the trailers. I didn't watch any of the trailers, so I don't know kind of what the marketing was implying surrounding that. So I liked that she ended up just being a normal person. And so one of the things with her is that she doesn't kill the people that she captures unless they make her mad, then she will. But she gets stuck with this video that talks about breastfeeding a child and kind of what is good for the child, what's bad, things like that. And so this character, who is basically nonverbal, she's just basically really messed up and can't speak and everything. And so she kidnaps these people and puts them in this pit with this gate over it because she basically just wants to be a mom and she just wants them to be her baby. And so at the very end, Tess does end up killing her with the gun that kind of shows up periodically. But it was a surprisingly emotional final few moments when Tess shoots her, because she's basically just this creepy lady who has no problem killing people and whatever, is just concerned with Tess's bullet wound that she has and is just like wants to help her in her really weird, twisted, demented way. And then, Tess shoots her and that's that. But I like that it was unexpected and that it was unique. I don't know how seriously I took it. I'm still weighing that on whether or not I thought it was kind of silly or if I thought it was, really inventive and well done. But at the very least, I really applaud the fact that it got a little weird and it was okay with that, because that's definitely something you see less and less from movies that get released in theaters. Obviously, there are tons of streaming movies and I don't know, do they do direct to DVD anymore? But, those types of lower budget movies, they get super weird. But the risk is less there because they go in basically knowing kind of what they are and with that low of a budget. And so to have this be a high enough budget movie that's getting released in theaters, and it's got, Bill Skarsgård in it, who is not, obviously he's not a household name, but has some notoriety. And to take that and be willing to gamble and get a little weird with it, I really, really liked that. So if you want to support something that's a little off the wall and, a little strange, I would definitely recommend go seeing the movie. Like I mentioned earlier, so I went to an earlier showing that it was cheaper and it wasn't the nighttime prices that they do. I don't think I'd recommend. I mean, whether or not you think the nighttime prices are worth it is up to you. For me, I don't think it would have been worth it to pay full price, but definitely earlier in the day, especially if you go on the weekend or something. That's great. Or if you just like to go out and see stuff, then and pay the prices at night, then that's totally an option too. So you do whatever you want. It's your money. Anyway, so that is Barbarian. Yeah. Quick apologies. I never did a review for episode 3 of House of the Dragon. Life just got a little chaotic this past week, and honestly, I just didn't have the time. I don't know if I will or if I'll just start again with episode 4. I haven't decided about that yet. And then I'm also currently playing through The Last of Us Part 1, which I want to review once I'm finished with that too. Realistically, I could probably review it now about halfway through the game, and I feel like most of the points that I have could apply to the game as a whole, but I've heard some mutterings of improved boss battles later in the game, so I kind of want to get to those first just to see if that makes much of a difference before I do my review. But I'm just about to the part where I'm going to meet Sam and Henry, so that tells you where I'm at in the game. So anyways, that was my review. Got a little distracted at the end there, but I'll talk to you guys later. See ya.